Hello and welcome. Get ready for an inspiring episode today as we welcome Ron Angel, a true Renaissance man in the world of real estate. After a 5-year tour of service in the U.S. military and 14 years leading software engineering teams in the IT industry, Ron made a life-altering decision to pursue his passion for real estate, driven by the desire to create financial security and generational wealth for his family. In just 2 years, Ron's real estate journey has been nothing short of extraordinary. He's founded multiple companies, including a wholesaling company, flipping company, and a private lending company. And he also built a small buy and hold portfolio, a ground-up construction project, and has been partnering with multiple other investors, going from never having gone full cycle on a deal to over 40 transactions under his belt. He now focuses on 2 flipping companies and a deep partnership with REI Junkies, running lead generation, marketing, and investor relations. Ron is now a seasoned investor, entrepreneur, and mentor, helping others learn from his wealth of experience as a runway coach in the 7-figure flipping mastermind. As a U.S. military veteran, a loving husband, and a dedicated father, Ron leverages his agile and tech experience to identify, analyze, and execute profitable deals in various markets across the U.S. while sharing his success and knowledge with aspiring real estate investors. Join us for an insightful conversation with this multifaceted entrepreneur. Ron, thank you for joining us today.
Awesome, Tracy. Yeah, it's awesome to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited. So let's go ahead and dive in. Why don't you start by sharing a little bit with us about your journey, how you went from military to IT and now to real estate? What did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's been quite a journey, and I feel like at every step of the way, there's always like at every point in time, there's sort of like this big decision to be made. There's like a spark of something that's pulling me to the next thing. And so starting with the military, I actually was born and grew up as a child in Israel. And so, growing up, I always kind of knew I would serve in the military, like military service is mandatory in Israel. And so like I always had that in the back of my mind. I moved to the US when I was about 9.5 years old, but that still kind of stuck with me. And so after I graduated high school and went to college, my college roommate, he had actually joined the reserves. And over a summer, he went and did like some training with his reserve unit and stuff, and came back and told me all the stuff that they were doing, like NBC training and, nuclear, biological, chemical, like just like cool, like military stuff. And I'm like, yeah, actually, I want to do that as well. So this is right after 9/11, I enlisted, went in as a enlisted soldier, and I served for just under 5 years. And when I started, like I had dreams and aspirations of, going to officer candidate school and making a career out of it and so on. But then there was a point, and I remember this vividly one evening, like just a thought came into my mind about what else I could be doing kind of outside the military. And I don't know how it happened so fast, but it happened really fast where I just kind of decided, you know what, there's another adventure out there for me. And so I left the military. I did about 4 years in South Korea. So I was in Korea at the time, left the military, finished my degree in computer and information science, and then moved into the tech industry. And so there I kind of came up, climbed the corporate ladder. I started out as a software engineer and then became a lead engineer, a manager. I was a software architect for a while. I kind of wore multiple hats over that course of time. And then I moved into a leadership role. So I took on a job in a big company, ADP, the payroll company, as a director of software engineering. And that was like a big role for me. It was kind of like a double promotion. One of those things where I had just total imposter syndrome. I remember telling my family and myself, which is really kind of dumb and a lot of negative self-talk, but like wondering, will I survive? Will I last more than a couple of months at this place? Like I was willing to bet on myself and try, but I wasn't sure.
Okay.
And so, yeah, corporate America there was definitely a rocky ride at that point for me. And I went another 4 years at that point in that role. But again, I think it was during COVID, like after a year after COVID, the COVID period started.
Mm-hmm.
I was working from home and got to spend a lot more time with my family, and just like realized that there was something that's pulling me to do something else. And I wanted to seek that financial freedom, the freedom of time, so I can spend even more time with the family and really show up the way I wanted to. I always told myself that I was doing it all for them, all the hard work and the late nights and working weekends to get that next promotion, get that bonus, get that, that equity, those restricted stock units vested so that I can bring more money so we can have better vacations and do renovations on the house. But I was telling myself that I was doing it for them, but I wasn't. I was doing it for me. And I realized that I was not living in alignment with my values. And so that's what got me started into, I dabbled in real estate prior to that, but that's what got me started thinking about, okay, I need to find some way to get out of corporate America and do this full time. And that's what started that part of the journey.
Awesome. I love that. Can you talk a little bit more? You said I wasn't living in alignment with my values. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of how you came to that conclusion? Were you reading things or consuming content, or it just was sort of like your general observations of your life? Like, how did you come to that point where you're like, this is not it? Like, I want something over here, but I'm over here. And like, how do I bring those, so that they're together?
It's such an interesting question. I mean, I haven't really thought about that a lot, but now thinking about it, I realized that I didn't realize it at the time that I wasn't living, true to my values. It was sort of a feeling that I just wanted to spend more time with my family, and I wanted to find some way to accomplish that and have more control over my time and energy. And then that started a few other things on my journey that helped me develop, that I kind of went on a real personal development journey. And then as part of that, in hindsight, realized that it wasn't just this feeling that I wanted to spend more time with the family, but there really was a disconnect between how I told myself and told others that I wanted to show up, which is more time with the family versus what I was actually doing. So it was kind of like, when you do a lot of this kind of like self-discovery, you realize these things in hindsight. And in the moment, I was starting to change that direction and live more in alignment with my values, but I didn't even realize that that's what was happening and that was misaligned.
Yeah, that's so relatable. I feel like in my own story, it was very similar, where there was a period of time during those last couple of years that I was in the military that I could feel that something was not right. It wasn't what I wanted it to be, but it definitely took quite a while. And even now, since retirement, of really doing, like you said, that sort of self-discovery and that look inward to kind of figure out what is it that I'm trying to accomplish, and then how can I set things up so that I'm able to do it more in alignment. But it's more of like a looking back, you can see kind of how those things line up. But when you're in it, it's not that simple and that cut and dry. Is just like, I just need to align myself.
For sure.
So I think that's a really important point to, to talk about, because I think once you've already kind of been through it, or at least you're a little further along in your journey and you're not just starting out and in that point of feeling like things aren't the way you want them to be, it's a lot easier to kind of look back and kind of see how the stars start to align. But when you're in it, it's not that simple. So
for sure.
Now, I know you've embarked on several real estate ventures in these 2 years since you kind of started down this entrepreneurial path in real estate. Can you share some of maybe like the more memorable projects that stand out, or those that maybe have shaped your journey and kind of helped you move into that alignment a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. So it definitely wasn't smooth sailing. The way I did it is not something that I'd recommend. At the time, it seemed like you've heard the expression. It seemed like a good idea at the time.
Yeah,
it did. It seemed like a great idea at the time, but in hindsight, I might have done it a little bit differently. So I left my full-time job, a career of 14 years, very high-paying salary in the tech industry, like working in Manhattan with no plan, but no business to speak of, no other income. So I basically dove in and started building a business from scratch. And that was a wholesaling business. I focused on Raleigh, North Carolina, which is a very competitive market. I was one of very, 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 very many wholesalers, and started direct to seller marketing campaign with direct mail, and later on added some other channels. The way I did it, and really the way I justified it, was So let me back up actually. The original plan when I first started thinking about leaving my career and going into real estate full time was I would start picking up rentals and, kind of one rental at a time, build up the passive income, and then eventually transition out once I replaced enough of my income to do that. But as I was going on that journey of self-discovery and learning more about myself and kind of like the spark was lit and then slowly a fire started really burning inside, I realized like I wanted to do this really, really fast. Okay. The original plan was like 5 years. I'll pick up a few rentals a year and then I'll get to 10K a month, passive income. You know the deal. Yeah. Nice round numbers, right? It sounds great. But then I realized, well, can I somehow do that in 2 years? Mm-hmm. And then 2 years turned into 18 months and 18 months turned into, can I find some way, and I won't pick up 50 rentals in a few months, but can I find some way to where I can leave my job by the end of the year and just
and just scale as quickly as possible.
Scale as quickly as possible. And so the way out of that, the way to solve that was to develop an active source of income. So it wasn't going to come through passive income. It was going to have to be active. And so there were a couple of options for me there. One is flipping, the other is wholesaling. I'm sure there's other things I could have done, but I decided to join the 7-figure flipping mastermind in the Runway group and kind of burn the boats, leave my company and do it full time and just start a wholesaling company from scratch. So that's what I started. That was, I guess you can say, the most memorable, endeavor. And it was the most instructive. I learned the most doing that from, having never run any sort of business. I'd led and managed and stuff in the military and in corporate America, but I'd never run a business. I'd never been a CEO. And there were just a lot of lessons I still learn today. But it was rough initially. It took me a while to get my first deal. I eventually did. I eventually started scaling and hiring, and I did a bunch of deals that first year. But then the market shifted. This was 2022, with interest rates going up. And by the end of the year, like I had to let go of a bunch of people because the contracts I was getting weren't deeply discounted enough. I couldn't disposition them. And so that led to a few other things that kind of led to the next parts of the journey. But I think the wholesaling company kind of building that from scratch and just learning a whole bunch of lessons really quickly was probably the most impactful for me.
Okay. I know you mentioned like the main question that you quickly got to was like, how can I scale as quickly as possible? And your answer to that was by developing an active source of income. And then you joined the mastermind. Can you talk about what some of the strategies or tools, like what are a couple of the things that putting yourself in that situation that actually enabled you to kind of like fast forward the process?
For sure. I mean, one was not having a plan B, right? That just when your back's against the wall, you're going to do whatever it takes to make progress. So that's kind of like, I like this notion of forcing functions. So putting something in place that's going to force you to do a thing, right? Whether you like it or not. I'll give you one example. I used one today. So I've been wanting to get on podcasts and do all this stuff and like set up my background nice. And I haven't done that and reset up my recording setup. And, I haven't been doing that. I've been saying I want to do that for a couple of months. And so what I decided to do is like, let me just book a bunch of podcasts and that's going to force me. And so what did I do? 2 hours ago, I was in a team meeting with 15 other people and I was on Zoom. But while I was doing that, I was setting up my mic and my camera and got everything set up and tested it. It forced me to do it. And now that, I have a pretty blank background and, so that's not ideal, but I got that first part done and I have another podcast I'll be recording later this week. And so guess what I'm going to be doing tonight? I'm going to set this thing back up so that I can have an awesome background just like you have over there.
I love that you said that though, because I promise you the first episode I recorded, this was not here. Because exactly the same thing. Those forcing functions are so critical. And I remember at the beginning of the summer, Peely had me on her podcast. And then sort of after things were done, she was like, so when are you going to start your podcast? And I was like, I'm not starting a podcast. But, she eventually convinced me that it was a good idea and why I should try it. And so the very first thing I did was commit to Peely. Okay, I'll start a podcast. And then it was like, okay, let's set a timeline. I was like, I can't do it this summer. Busy, kids are in school. I can't do it until the kids go back to school. So she's like, okay, when is that? I'm like, September. So she's like, okay, by the end of September, I want, X number of episodes and, let's get it done. And it was because that first step, I committed to Peely. Okay, I will start a podcast. That all of a sudden it was like mid-September and I was like, man, I better start booking these things. So I started scheduling people and then I was like, oh man, like I got some interviews coming up. I better get this equipment. I better get my stuff set up. And I definitely recorded a few episodes before the background was, the way it was. And I'm sure I'll change it like 5 times by the time it's all said and done. But such an important point that like by putting yourself in that position where you have to take action, you're going to take action. It might not be perfect, but imperfect action is still going to move you in the direction that you want to go. So that's awesome.
Exactly. I love that whole concept of imperfect action. It's just like doing something is better than nothing. And this is honestly, it's one of my weaknesses. Like anytime I do a thing, I try to boil the ocean. I try to come up with a grand plan and I got to get it all set up and it's got to be perfect. And I want to make sure that all of it gets done. Every aspect, every angle has to be covered. And it's like, and then things don't get done. And this is something that I'm continuing to try to improve on. It's just like, okay, what is that? In tech, we used to call it an MVP, a minimum viable product. What is that smallest unit of functionality that I can release into the wild where I can start getting feedback? I get something done, I start getting feedback, and then I can iterate. And so that's another thing I'm trying to get better at is like, okay, well, I don't have time to do all this whole big project in the next week. What is that smallest thing that I can do today? And let's get something out there. And that's going to also create a forcing function for me to have to take the next step and then the next one.
Right. And actually start moving the needle forward, even if it's in small increments instead of from 0 to 60.
Exactly.
So I know you just mentioned one challenge that you've been working through. Can you share some insights on maybe like what is one of the biggest obstacles that you've faced over this transition into real estate investing and how you overcame it?
That is a great question. I think one of the biggest obstacles for me was, as a wholesaler, just not being good on the phones, not being good at sales, and frankly, not having the right quote unquote personality profile to do it. And because I had that forcing function, because it was do or die, I had to force myself to make calls, to get sales training and just do it. And by the end of it, I became a somewhat proficient, acquisition specialist. Like I can go direct to seller. I can talk to sellers. I can build that trust and rapport, get them to know, like, and trust me and do a deal with me. Was I the best acquisition manager? No. Did I enjoy it? No. I did it because I had to, but that was a huge struggle to just force myself to do that stuff. But it proved to me that I can do it. Now, the other lesson that I learned is that you should figure out what you're good at and what you like to do and do that, and not force yourself to do a thing that you really, really hate. And sometimes you have to try something to know whether you're going to be good at it. And so that whole journey led me away from wholesaling. I no longer wholesale on my own. Just about everything I'm doing now is through partnerships. One of which is I'm working in someone else's business in REI Junkies. It's wholesale, an acquisitions company, but I don't do any of the direct to seller stuff. I focus on the stuff that I'm really, really good at, my genius zone there.
I love that. I think the sooner that we can take that time to like do the self-reflection and figure out like what are those skills that we enjoy and the things that we're good at, the more time that we can spend doing those things and outsource the other stuff to either partners or, hire a VA. That's something I'm working on right now. I think when you're first getting started, sometimes you don't have the capacity to offload those things and you kind of have to figure it out initially. But the sooner that you can figure out what those things are and we can transition those to people who are better at those things, so we can really focus on the things that we enjoy and excel at, the better off we can get that sort of exponential growth and trajectory towards what we're looking for.
Absolutely.
So I know you mentioned a few different things that you're doing in real estate, either now or previously. Are there any key principles or strategies that you think have allowed you to excel across, a multitude of different areas within real estate?
That's a great question. I mean, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about a minute ago, as far as understanding your genius zone and operating in it as much as possible. So over the last 3 to 4 months, I've transitioned just about all of my activities to partnerships. I have a flipping partnership in North Carolina with someone I met in my market. where I'm focusing on, raising capital, doing systems and processes, making sure that the deals are fully funded, things like that. And he's managing the construction, finding the contractors, finding the deals, and all that. I have another partnership in Michigan, very similar kind of arrangement. I focus on the capital raising systems and processes, and she manages the rehabs. With REI Junkies, I'm doing marketing, lead generation, investor relations. Those are areas that I'm really good at, and have them handle, everything else. So it's around, for me, the key principle, and this is not necessarily for everyone. I think that's just kind of the way I'm built, and I'll explain why in a second. Just as much as possible, work through partners so that I can contribute what I'm the best in the world at, as we say, and they contribute what they're the best in the world at. And then we grow a lot faster, and we each achieve more.
I love that. Do you think, or what do you think from your experiences, both in the military previously and in the IT world, what do you think fills that like desire for and enjoyment of working in partnership? Because I mean, I know coming from the military, we do like everything in teams. You don't really do much by yourself. I'm not sure how true that is in the IT space as well, because that's not my area of expertise. But I'm curious, based on what you were just talking about, like, do you see some parallels there, or why do you think that works for you?
I think it's less to do with my history or like previous employment, and more to do with just my character, my personality. I find that, and I've learned this about myself through self-reflection and going on this journey. I will work harder when there's a partner or someone else depending on me than when I'm doing it for myself. I can't really explain that. It's illogical. Like, one would think that if you're doing it all for yourself, you'll work harder because you stand to benefit. But for me, when there's someone else depending on me, I will work twice as hard, 10 times as hard, because I know that someone else is depending on me. And so that, for me, that's a key motivator. Also, I think the accountability, right? Having to explain to someone else whether you did or didn't do a thing, right? And being true to your word and doing the things you say you will, that is also a big motivator. And so, but obviously that those skills work really well in the military. And for that matter, in the tech industry. In tech, just about everything is team-based, especially in these days in, distributed oriented service oriented architecture, distributed types of software and stuff that's built in enterprise software. Everything is team-based. But yeah, it kind of works really well with my character. So
it's interesting that you say that. I know it's super hard to put into words, but I could completely relate to that concept of like, if I know that someone else is depending on me, I am so much more likely to do it, to the point where like my workouts in the morning, I actually like meet some other people and do Zoom workouts a couple of times a week, because I know I'm so much more likely to actually get out there and do it if I've got to log on, or I've got to explain to them why I'm not logging on, as opposed to just doing it by myself. So I think accountability is a huge piece in terms of, for a lot of us, setting ourselves up for success. If we know there's something that we want to get done, putting that accountability in place is definitely going to help us move the needle faster.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's why masterminds work. That's why small group accountability sessions work, because you're accountable to someone else. And, we're social creatures, right? So we don't like to disappoint. And we like to kind of do what we say we're going to do, especially when there's an external person that might be there to, even if they don't say anything, that they might be thinking something, right? And you don't want to disappoint somebody. So
absolutely. I know we've mentioned that you are a coach and mentor within the 7-figure flipping mastermind. What type of advice do you offer to the aspiring investors that are kind of just getting started, and what common misconceptions do you help them overcome?
That's a great question. I mean, for me, there's no blanket advice other than just like take action, figure out what you want to achieve, come up with a plan, and just take action. But, when I'm doing my coaching, what I like to do is, especially if it's someone I haven't met before, is try to figure out, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? What are your goals? And why are you doing all this? And then figuring out, okay, what is the best next step for you to take to do that? And let's come up with a plan for doing that. And then there's the accountability portion. But like ultimately take action, imperfect action. That's what's going to move the needle. And, Bill Allen talked in the most recent Flip Hacking Live about the OODA loop, the observe, orient, decide, and act. And so the key aspect of that whole loop is the acting, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need the action so that you can get the feedback of whatever you're doing, so that you can, start the loop again, observing and orienting and then deciding. But the action is key.
Yeah, I think that's super important. One of the things you just said was like identify the next right step or the next best step. And I think for a long time, I too kind of struggle with that concept of like perfectionism. You want everything to be just a certain way. And so you spend so much time trying to like figure that out instead of just actually doing something. And so one of the things that I've found immensely helpful over the last several months since I've been in the 7-figure multifamily mastermind has been that piece of where figuring out like, how can I reduce risk? How can I partner with more experienced people? How can I, take small steps that are going to put me in a position to feel really good about the next step, and just focusing on, instead of trying to figure it all out, like what is the next step I can do to get me a little bit closer? And that's been really, really helpful in terms of like continuing to, to keep that moving.
Absolutely.
I know. So let's switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about how your background in tech maybe has set you up for some success in the real estate world. Can you talk about like how do you use data and analytics to do, to find and execute these real estate deals?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So basically, like you said, from me coming from tech, like I'm very much a data and analytics guy. So, and this plays into another one of my strengths, which is marketing, right? So for me, looking at the data that's generated from the marketing activities. So for example, if we're cold calling, I want to see, how many leads we're generating per week. I want to see how many the dialer, how many phone calls it's making, how many connections are being made, and that's going to help me assess a couple of things. One, the strength and the health of the list and how well it's working, but also my callers, and see how much time are they spending on the dialer, how many times are they getting connections per week, and are they putting in the time? And so then I can back out, are the results they're getting correlated the way they should be with the inputs that they're giving? And if not, then I can look at, is it the dialer that's not doing the right thing? Is it the list? Or if the inputs aren't there, okay, now I need to have a coaching conversation with someone and say, well, okay, we need to look at how much time you're spending on the dialer. Are you taking too long to disposition calls? Are you taking too long of breaks? Things like that. And then similarly for any marketing channel, direct mail, how many pieces we're sending each week, how many calls we're getting, how many of those are leads, how many of those are motivated leads, and so on and so forth. And so just really being able to see like any one of these activities, especially in marketing, is it's generating data, and we need to crunch that data and turn it into information that's actionable so that we can make changes.
Awesome. So for folks who are possibly coming from a background in tech, are there particular ways that maybe they can harness that background to get involved in real estate?
Great question. I mean, I think just like the data analytics skills for sure. Also automation skills, like figuring out how to connect different disparate systems together through automations. I mean, there's a really great tool called Zapier or Zapier that allows you to connect things like your dialer to the CRM to various things. I know other investors who have created like web scraping bots to scrape county websites to automatically pull leads from things like, well, I don't know, tax delinquents or foreclosures, things like that. So kind of finding if someone is like really software and development oriented, which when I got out of tech, I was like, I don't want to write another line of code again, probably for 10 years. So like I stayed away from that. I don't want to build a website. It's like, nah, thanks. But for folks that still have that passion, like to do that stuff, there's so much that can be done to kind of like streamline processes, find inefficiencies, and kind of bring those skills to bear. And frankly, I mean, there's real estate related startups all the time, like figuring out how to connect data and bring value to the marketplace. I know this is like very vague explanation of how to do what to do, but really the value that you're bringing there is like figuring out what are the problems that need to be solved and how to apply technology to solve those problems. And that's how you make your millions. So like, it's not something I'm going to come up with off the top of my head. It's like using that core skill set of like figuring out what are the problems to solve and how to do that. And that's how you can bring those skills to bear.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of, with my own background, like coming from the healthcare industry, there's no like specific job in real estate that I would say, oh, you're coming from healthcare, you should do this. But
Right.
along those same lines, in terms of like problem solving, process improvement, figuring
Mm.
out how to build efficiency into a process are things that we did all the time when I was in healthcare administration. So it's not like a specific hard skill so much as it is kind of a combination of kind of coming in and being able to look at things a little bit differently and figure out how to build those efficiencies into the system. So I think hopefully that will be helpful for people that are coming from, tech background, just to kind of think about how they might be able to use their skills a little bit differently if this is something that they're interested in doing in the future. This one's a little bit kind of a spin-off question, but do you currently use any AI in your business? And what are your thoughts on how it might impact real estate investing, both in the short and longer term?
Great question. So I'll stay away from prognosticating and predicting the future of how I think it'll impact it. I don't think anyone really knows, or not many people really do. I do use it a little bit. I mean, mostly for things like maybe quickly generating copy or taking copy that I or someone else wrote and quickly rewriting it for just to make it cleaner and more better understood. I've used it for generating contracts and JV agreements if the stakes are low and not an attorney and all the caveats aside. But if I want to come up with like a very simple JV agreement with me and somebody that I pretty much trust, and I just want to get the right language in there. I've used it for things like that. Obviously, if the stakes are a little bit higher, definitely have an attorney review it and make sure that everything is there to protect you. But I've used it for things like that, job ads, quickly writing job ads, things like that. With this type of tool, you obviously have to go back in and kind of review and revise and make sure that it's conveying the message that you want, it has the content that you want, that it's not generating garbage. But it's a really big time saver. It's 80-20.
Awesome. Appreciate your insights on that. Now, I would like to talk a little bit about how you manage your time. I like to ask this question just to get feedback from folks on how everybody kind of approaches it a little bit differently. But, with as much as you have going on and all of your different business pursuits, plus your roles, husband, father, coaching, all of that, like how do you make that all work?
It's a constant iteration. So, and I like this question a lot because the way that I manage time and my task management has evolved throughout my entire career. I mean, it used to be when I was just a software engineer, I had like a little notepad, and every day I would just write those things that I needed to get done that day, and then I would cross them off day to day, and whatever carried over would just carry it over to another day, and literally on a piece of paper, and I would put it in my filing cabinet. And then once a week, when I wanted to review what I did for that week, if I had to do my timesheet, I just pulled it out and I saw what got done and what didn't get done. But over time, I've iterated on that process, and with work from coaches and reading books and all that stuff, it's evolved significantly. So what I do today is I let the calendar I let the calendar dictate what I'm going to be doing during the day, and I spend time on a regular basis, once a week, just planning the upcoming week. I look at the entire inventory of everything I need to do over the next couple of weeks. I figure out what I'm going to allocate time for, and then I just will calendar block, and then during the course of the week, I will just follow the calendar. Obviously, things come up, so you have to make adjustments. Meetings run over, urgent phone calls come in, things like that. So you always have to adjust. Leaving some blank space in the calendar is always great, so that you can have a little bit of buffer to react to things. But generally, the strategy is to get things onto the calendar and then just follow it as best you can and adjust where needed. Taking a step back to more of a 10,000 foot view, I like to plan out not just week to week, but I like to plan out like quarter by quarter. So I follow a system called the 12-week year. So that's a great book. And that talks about, coming up with quarterly goals and then coming up with a week-to-week action plan on what you're going to do each week and what are the consistent inputs that you need to have in order to generate the outputs that you're looking for. And then just tracking each week that you're doing those things and then, rating it. Currently, I do about 60% of 12-week year. I've gone from 100%, to actually like tracking and giving myself a score at the end of each week. to, not doing a whole lot. Right now, it's like, okay, I know what my goals are for the quarter. I've broken them down into tasks, and then weekly I'll go into a tool I use called Asana and see, okay, what are the things coming up? Let me block off the time, in the calendar to make sure those things get in, and then do the daily adjustments as I need to go. And then things that don't get done, I'm still in the mode of, I do quite a bit of work on the weekends and stuff. So Saturday, Sunday, sometimes it's just my time to catch up on, emails that have, were lesser priority, didn't get taken care of, or other little small tasks that I still need to do. And kind of like the overflow is on the weekends, frankly.
Got it. Yeah, I like that concept of the 12-week year. I've definitely heard of it before, but I haven't actually tried it. But I think time blocking in general is something that I have been trying to figure out. Definitely, like you said, it's sort of iterative, like try different things, tweak it here and there, see what's working, what's not. But it's definitely helping me get a little bit closer to what I envision as my future goal of like how my calendar functions in terms of like specific chunks of time that are for business and specific chunks of time that are for family, where I can limit the bleed over between the two. And that's sort of my focus at this point, is like really trying to be fully present in whichever it is that I'm doing, instead of feeling like I'm trying to juggle them all the time. So love that 12-week year. I'm gonna have to check that one out.
Awesome.
So I wanted to ask about your recent adventure. I don't know what to call it. You did some adventure trek thing that I saw you post about on Facebook, but I'm curious to hear more about that. Like, what was it? What did you learn? Just whatever you're willing to share about that.
Love it. This is a great question. So I've always, not always, but recently I've had this interest in just wilderness survival, like basic survival skills, how to make a fire, how to build a shelter, things like that. And I've been really, really busy and unable to, pick up a book and try, learning the skills on my own and stuff. And so what I decided to do it was earlier in the year, is like, let me just find a course and let me just go do a thing, right? Mm-hmm. This is similar to, and what got me thinking about this is similar to like our mastermind events and Seven Figure and other masterminds. Okay. Just go for 3 days and you set everything aside, and like you're just working on your business, you're working on networking, and you're just dedicating that time. And so I figured the same concept could work for this thing that I've been interested in and not able to dedicate the time. So I did some research, and I reached out on social media to ask if anyone knew of any wilderness survival schools or courses or whatever. And I found this place called the Boulder Outdoor Survival School. And this is Boulder, Utah, not Boulder, Colorado. Okay. And basically this survival school has been in place since, I think, the late 60s. And these days, they have various courses, from a 1-week survival course to they have a 14-day, and they have a 28-day. They have other courses that are called like hunter-gatherer, where you're literally like living off the land. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, lots of cool stuff. So I just decided to dive in. I signed up for a 1-week course, a 7-day course. I had to do a lot of physical training. It's probably the hardest survival school for civilians in the whole country. And so it's a lot of hiking. It's minimal gear. It's not like backpacking, and it's up in the mountains, right? In the mountains in Utah. So pretty rigorous. And so I did a lot of training leading up to it. And then I just went and hoped for the best. I wasn't sure exactly how it would go, but it was great. I mean, one of the best things I've ever done. Learned a lot about myself. I've learned a lot about my own, like what I was capable of, kind of grew, mentally, tested myself mentally, spiritually, emotionally. And I met a really, really great group of friends there, the other students. So there were 8 students total and 3 instructors, and like everybody was just amazing human beings from many different parts of the country. And we all like really pulled together, helped each other, were very supportive, got to know each other really well as people. And I just, I got a group of friends probably for the rest of my life that I'll be staying in contact with. So. But it was a real challenge, real wilderness survival, minimal gear, no sleeping bag, no tents. We slept out in the cold, had to figure out how to keep warm. We did night hikes and physical hikes. We learned how to, build a fire. We didn't eat for the first 30 hours. I mean, all kinds of stuff. Like thought I was going to die a couple of times, honestly. Not
It sounds super intense.
It was intense, but it was, things like in the moment, like asking myself, what the heck am I doing here? Mm-hmm. But in hindsight, I can't wait to go out and do it again.
That sounds like an absolutely incredible experience. Do you have any takeaways from that you feel like have impacted the way that you're approaching things, either with your business or just sort of like your overall goals?
I don't know that, honestly, I don't know that I came back with anything that I could bring to the business other than I can deal with a whole lot more suck than I thought.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so like thinking about, man, I don't want to call these sellers. Well, I mean, I was able to, the first night, we started off with a night hike, and then after a couple hours, and it's completely like, there's no headlamps, no artificial light, nothing. And the instructor said, okay, we're going to go over here and we'll see you in the morning. They don't tell you anything. They don't tell you how to keep warm. They don't tell you where to find, some place to sleep. They just they let you figure it out. And so we all figured it out, and we all lasted through the night. It was freaking cold that night. And we all, I don't think I slept a wink. I shivered all night, but I survived. But it's like, I can deal with a whole lot more physical discomfort than I thought possible. And when compared to that physical discomfort, the discomfort of like calling a seller that might yell at me, it's like, okay, who cares?
Yeah.
Right.
It takes that whole idea of like get comfortable being uncomfortable to like a whole new level.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Nice. So I guess I have two more questions here as we sort of wrap things up. Can you share a little bit of your perspective on what does creating generational wealth and financial security for your family mean for you personally?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it means not having to work if I don't want to, and having full control over my time and energy. This is really more about the financial freedom and not as much the generational wealth. I have a different perspective on that. But as far as the financial freedom, it's being able to, I don't have financial freedom yet as an entrepreneur. I mean, I'm still very much building the business. I'm still figuring it out yet and like building it up. But I already have, and from day one, I had control over my schedule. Like I was no longer on someone else's schedule where I had to be at a meeting or had to ask permission to go on vacation and basically do what I want. And I was responsible for that. And so for me, it's about kind of controlling my time and energy. And then financial freedom will come when I don't have to work in the business, and I can go off and take a vacation with my family for a couple of months over the summer and not have to check email, not have to make phone calls. So, and then as far as generational wealth, it's not something I think about too much. That's just me. From my perspective, what I want to pass down to my kids is less that material wealth, but more that wealth of knowledge and concepts and kind of self-understanding. And I feel like if I leave them no physical property, but I leave them with this notion that they know themselves really well, they know what they're good at, they can go and make all the money they'll ever need. And so that's kind of that's my current thinking on that topic.
I really like that perspective that the wealth isn't necessarily in the money itself, but in the knowledge and kind of having that baseline of if you have those couple of key things that like you can,
go make money.
The money's not a worry. Like you're going to be able to figure things out, but having the right mindset and sort of grounding to be able to go off of. That's pretty cool. I like that.
For sure.
And then last question, what projects or goals are you currently working on? What's next on the horizon for you as far as real estate ventures or your entrepreneurial journey?
I got a lot going on. So one thing we're working on is with a few partners, and this is just, purely serendipity. The most recent mastermind event, or actually was Flip Hacking Live. We had kind of like a little event just for the mastermind members, which was the Rise event a couple of days before Flip Hacking Live. And I got into some conversations with a couple of guys that I really know, like, and trust quite a lot. And just by chance, I was able to come in on a deal. We're buying a hotel in Arlington, Texas. And that looks like a super, super sweet deal. Really aligns with, what I can bring to the table, which as a capital partner, I was able to help there with some, EMD and risk capital, but also doing some money raising. And so we're currently, and we're talking with another potential partner that may help fund the entire deal. So we may not need to do a raise, but if we do need to do a raise, I'm excited about that because that's gonna get me to really be able to level up as a capital raiser, which I've done some in the past. So I'm super excited about that hotel deal. We're closing by the end of the year. And so that's number one. And then kind of just getting my work with REI Junkies as the director of marketing off the ground, currently working on building that the marketing team, which was a little bit siloed prior to me coming on, pulling that entire team together, working in a cadence, doing, coming up with the kind of the overarching story for REI Junkies and what we're doing there. And really the goals for us are we're helping at least 500 families realize the dream of home ownership through non-traditional financing by 2026. And we're going to help 5,000 families realize that dream by 2030. And so for us to be able to do that, we need to scale tremendously. And so what I'm working on with the team is kind of building the overarching story that we're want to project for the brand building for sellers, for people we're going to direct to seller, to help them understand that what makes us different and why they would want to work with us if the offer is the same, is we're ultimately helping the community and helping people realize that dream of home ownership, making sure that our investors that invest with us as private money lenders or in a fund that we're working on building currently, that they're not just getting a great return on their investment, but also helping with this dream of home ownership for lots of people in their local community. We're really excited about this. And then similarly for our renters and our buyers that sometimes we wholesale properties to. So really excited about kind of doing that brand building, telling that story. We're gonna, if you've ever heard of the concept of building a story brand, which is using sort of the concept of the hero's journey, where the avatar, the person that we're marketing to, is the hero and we're the guide, and we're helping them find the solution. We're helping them go on their hero's journey. So we're working on that this quarter. I'm super excited about that and being able to kind of start launching that in the new year.
That's super exciting. I love that idea. I mean, you kind of see how it goes full circle where, not only are you likely coming in and helping a seller who's potentially distressed and needs to, offload that property, but you're giving them an opportunity to contribute positively to someone else's story down the line. And all the players all along the way are being able to contribute to ultimately somebody being able to own a home, which is super exciting. That's really cool. I like that. Well, I want to thank you for coming today and being willing to share your story with us. I think yours is another great example that the path to financial freedom is winding and that we can all leverage unique skills and experiences that we have to pivot into ultimately alignment with our goals for the future. And so, I really love that attitude about giving back and using your experience to empower others in their wealth creation journeys. Awesome. What is the best way for our guests to connect with you if they would like to continue following your journey?
Absolutely. So I'm very active on Facebook. I do quite a bit of posting now. I'm actually doing this challenge that I invented, which is the 30 days of figuring out what to say, basically to try to get more of my message out there and help attract other people that I can help. And so, you can find me on Facebook, just search Ron Angel. I'm assuming we'll share kind of links in the show notes.
Yes, absolutely. We will share all of this in the show notes as well.
And then, that gets, I'm on Instagram as well. Most of the stuff is kind of repeated, and LinkedIn as well. So if you want to, anyone is welcome to follow me, DM me. Facebook is ideal. LinkedIn is good as well. And that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us and for sharing your wisdom with us today. We will get those things linked up in the show notes. And thank you to our wonderful listeners for tuning in to this episode and for being a part of this community. If you found value in this episode, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. Until next time, remember that your path to financial freedom and the life of your dreams might be closer than you think. Take that first step and explore the possibilities. Stay tuned for more insightful episodes. And again, thanks for listening.
Thanks so much, Tracy.